All right, everyone, we'll go ahead and get started. So my name is Brittany. I will be working the webinar today. Today's webinar is going to be custom reporting. You are all on mute, so if you do have any questions, please use the chat. There's also a Q&A feature. It's definitely better to use the chat just because it'll be easier for me to answer through there. So if you can use the chat, but I will toggle over to the Q&A if I do see something. I will stop periodically to take a look at questions, so I may not get to your question as soon as you type it, but I will definitely get to it. So again, please use that chat to ask any questions. Okay. There will be a recording of this webinar. Typically, we send it out within 24 to 48 hours, but you can also go to a particular address, and that is on our support site. So if you go to support.workamajig.com, if you search webinars, this is the page where it will show you our upcoming, but also all of the recordings for our previous webinars. So what we recommend is you can actually follow this page. So if you use this follow button, anytime we post something new, so a new upcoming, or when we post the past recordings, you can actually come to this link and then pull those webinar recordings. Okay. All right, so for your custom reporting, you have a couple of things that we'll go over today. So the first thing I'm going to go over is the rights. So not everyone will have the right to actually do the reports or create their own reports. So the first thing that I'm going to go into is going to be what rights someone would need to have. So if you go to system settings, if you have those rights to do so, you have security settings. And if you do start typing in, you'll see there's a couple of options in here. So I just did for custom reports. You have the ability to design custom reports, run custom, and then also edit custom listings. So listings are going to be your listing screen. So if you go and look for a group, a list of all of your projects in the system or clients or something like that, all of these rights are specific to running those custom reports. So that would be something that you would want to make sure if someone should be able to go in and modify reports or edit those reports, you would need them to have these specific rights. Not only do the listing screens give you the ability to do reporting, but also we have a full report center that has some of our reports that we created. So there's some default reports, but you also do have the ability to create custom reports if we don't have a report that you would benefit from. So with that, there are different data sets. So you have to tell the system where you want to start from in order to run those reports or to create those reports. So if I come all the way down, you'll see there is a heading in your security settings for reports. And so this will give you either the rights to view some of those reports that we've created or also edit some of those reports that we've created. So that's typically what you would need to do first is go into the rights and determine who should have the rights to view, who should have the rights to edit and run those custom reports, and then what should they have access to. So that would be more of the setup. And then again, I mentioned that a lot of your listing screens will double as report options. So if I come in and I want to take a look at my project listing screen, you have this view section here. So how I got here is the magnifying glass right here. You can toggle over to views if you're not already there. And then each one of these is actually a listing screen. So if I wanted to see my companies or my project listing screen or orders or any of these are all going to be listing screens that you have access to. So for my projects, I have an active one. So it's only going to show me projects that are considered active. We have an all, and then I created a few different other options in here. But if I go into active and I run this, I can see all of my active projects that I currently have going on. So these are all of the projects that I have. And then if I click into it, it'll open up that actual project. Okay. If I wanted to edit this, because I like some of the fields in here, but I also want to add some additional fields, this is where I would have to have the right to edit the listings. Okay, so you have the modify option right here. This is how I can go in and add groupings, because right now it's not really grouped by anything. I have columns, so what are the fields that I want to see up here? If you go into filters, what do I have the option of narrowing this list down by, and is there anything that's hard-coded into this report? So I pulled an active project list. So what we did was we said it's only going to pull active projects, so projects that are currently in an active status. And then the last option is giving reports names and how do they display out. So do I align left or align right? When I print it out, or when I go in and print it, is it portrait or is it landscape? And then also, when we print out this report, at the top of that, should it show what was the search criteria I used to run that report? When we go into the active project or this particular listing, should I run this when it's open? Meaning I don't have to click the search button, it just automatically runs it. Or do I want to have to click search after I enter in any search criteria that I might have? If I list this as private, it means that only I would have access to see this report. So if I create a report, it's going to be just for me because maybe it has some sensitive information in it that I wouldn't want others to see. Then I would want to click on this private button, and then only I would be able to see that particular report. You'll notice when we enter in or create some of these reports, some of these will default in as private. So you may have to uncheck this if it should be a listing that multiple people might need to see. The last section in here is visible to. So which of my security groups should be able to view this particular listing screen? So again, this is a report or a listing screen. Which of my groups should be able to view that? Plus button if I'm missing some of those groups, or if I said maybe my clients shouldn't be able to see this, you can click on the trash can next to any group that might not benefit or should be able to see this particular report. One thing that I like to take a look at is where did we pull this report from? So again, this is a project listing screen, so we use project level data. But as we run some of the custom reports that are in the report center, to know where we're pulling from or what I have the option of doing, I always look at the data set that we started from so I know what my options would be. Okay, so now starting with the layout, for my active projects, I want to group by client. So right now it is kind of sorting by client because it's going and grouping those because that is my first grouping option. But if I said I want the header to be what the client ID is, then I'm going to insert row to add in a group under the group section. And then as I start typing, I can either do client ID or client name, or I could do both. So I'm just going to choose client name as one of my groupings. And if I also want to add in some additional fields in here, so right now I have the client ID and name, project number, what the billing method is, project name, project status, project type. Maybe I also need to know who the account manager is. So I can start typing in my option, or I can just click the drop down and search through the options that we have. So obviously there's a ton of different options in here. It'd be tough to read them. So if you want to, again, you can start narrowing it down by typing in, and it'll go ahead and narrow down based off of what you are typing in. So that's how you can add your groupings. You can have multiple groupings, and basically it'll just tier the report. So it would show a heading for the client name first, and then if I add something else in, maybe again account manager, the next tier would be who the account manager is, and then list everything under that. So you can have multiple groupings if needed. Okay. So you can have as many columns as you would like in here. Just remember your report can end up being quite large, so just take that into consideration. And then again, on the filter side, anything that says prompt means that it's an option that I have to choose this particular item. So this is project status. So when I run the report, I can choose a particular project status. I can look for a particular project number or project name. Again, this one's hard coded in, so it doesn't give me the option. It's just going to only run for active projects, account manager and client ID. But if I also want to search for the type of billing method, you can also do billing method. You have different conditions. So when you do conditions, what that means is if I am doing the search criteria and I see that there's project number, do I have to type in the whole number? If it's equal to, I have to give it the whole project number. If I want to exclude certain things, I can say not equal to, or begins with, or does not begin with, or ends with. So you have a bunch of different options. Your most popular would be equal to, contains. If it's a date range, most of the time it would be a between. And then if we're talking numerically, some people want to search for reports that that are just looking for items that are open. So they might say greater than 0, or maybe they want to look for credits that a client has. So they might say less than 0. So your conditions are going to be very important when you're adding in those filters. Now value, again, if I was searching for a particular billing method, so maybe I call this active projects that are time and material or something, I can choose the value. Or if I use the prompt option, which again is what tells the system I want to be able to search for this, but I don't want it to be hard-coded in, then I click on that prompt, and the prompt label would just be what someone sees whenever they look at the search criteria that they can narrow this report down by. So once I click out, it'll go ahead and update that. One thing I'll show you is you can change the label. So if some of these are a little bit long, like if I don't really need it to say equal to in there, I just want to say billing method, then we can change the name of what shows for the search criteria. I'm going to take a look at some of the chats that we have. So I'm showing you this in Platinum, but if you are in Flash, the same thing applies. It's just you're looking at the screens differently, but as far as the functionality, all of this is going to be very similar. But I would definitely recommend moving over to Platinum sooner rather than later, just because the browsers will stop supporting Flash-based websites by 2020, so next year. We are obviously halfway through this year. So I would say try and get over to Platinum, and you can email support at Workamajig so that you can get training whenever you're ready for that. All right, the next one is eliminating security groups. It eliminates the need to set private. So the private option is a little bit separate from that. So if I am the only one who should be able to see it, then I'm going to list it as private. But if me and some of my coworkers that are in different groups need to see it, then you would want to indicate which security groups they are in. So choose the security groups that would need to actually see this particular report. So if we're looking at projects, typically a creative may or may not be able to look at that, so you might remove them. Accounting people may never need to be in projects, so you might remove them. But again, just whatever is applicable to your company. If you want others to be able to run this, but not everyone, then choose the security groups that should be able to run it. If it's a report only for you, then go ahead and check that private button. And then calculated columns or filters, what does that mean? Projects is not a good example of this, but if I'm in a report data set for like client invoices, that'll have a lot of totals in it, or maybe even a budget screen. So that's a good example is the budget. So I might have what the current budget is as one of my fields, and then maybe what we've billed for. So I would be able to see maybe this would be what the current budget is and then what we've actually billed the client. I can create a calculated column and say, go ahead and take the difference between budget and actual build, and then total those up, and that would be the option for calculated column. Again, this one's we're in the projects listing, so I don't really have a lot of options to show you that, but I will show you that in a later report. Is there an option to add a field to that based on your custom fields on the project? Yes, custom fields are an option. So if I insert a new row, custom fields always start with CF. So it'll show you where it's pulling from. So I have a campaign custom field. I have a company custom field. I also have a few project custom fields. So these are all of my project custom fields. So if you type in CF, it'll bring you to all of the options that you have for your custom fields. Why are there only certain fields available in Edit View? We tried to get all of the fields that would be applicable based off of each data set. So again, this one's pulling project level data. But if we have one report that has every single field available, some people are going to go a little bit overboard with their reports, and they might have 300 different fields in there. It would take forever to run, and it will also bog down your coworkers because you guys are all working on one site. So mine's app 19. If I run a report that ends up with like 50,000 fields in it based off of the search criteria, it's going to take a while to run, and then other people are also going to notice slowness. So we try as much as possible to add most of the applicable fields that you would need for a project listing screen or whatever listing screen you're in, but you're right, it is not going to show absolutely every field available in the system. So it looks like that's all the questions for now. A couple of the other items in here. So I showed you the field, that's the actual name in the system, but you can actually change the name that shows on the report. So for this one, it's client ID and name. We just called this client name. This one we stuck to be the same. I have just a fake custom field in there, so I could go in and change the name of this. So we'll call this one difficult, right? Because I can say, is my client on the annoying level? And then we'll just call it a difficulty level as the label that people see when they run the report. So I'm just going to go ahead and apply my changes for now. If I did not hit apply, then any of the changes that I made would not have gone through. So I added an account manager, I added a field called difficulty. So now in order for those to run, I need to click the search button. But if on my modify in the settings, I had said, go ahead and run this when it's open, it would have ran that automatically without having to hit search. So we'll go ahead and search. And then now it filled in those additional fields that I went in and added. If I click on the 3 lines here, some people call it a hamburger symbol, this is where the search criteria is. So I showed you how you can add in what search options I would have to narrow down this report. That is ultimately where you can pull those up. So we mentioned that I have project status, I have project number, I have project name, I have account manager. So here's all the options that I can narrow this report down by. So if I just wanted to see projects that are time and material, then I can start typing in and then search, and that's obviously going to narrow my report down even further. Okay. So I mentioned groupings. So I did a grouping by client ID. So here's my client ID. My second grouping was account manager. So I'm the account manager for pretty much all of my projects, but you'll notice that it'll go ahead and tier it again by client first, and then the next tier would be by account manager because I have those 2 different groupings, and then it shows all the results within there. Okay. You can print this out. This could actually be a print where you actually send it to your printer to print, but this is also the ability to either put it in Excel or CSV. So PDF is the one where you can actually physically get that copy to print out, and it'll just show whatever's on your screen is what it'll show, and you can either download it to your computer or you can print it. You also have the option to email it. When you click on this, it'll ask who you want to email. It calls it active projects, but if you wanted to go in and change that subject, you could. What is your actual body of the email, and then send. So that's the PDF. Otherwise, again, Excel or CSV, depending on what you would like to have that report as. Okay. So that is going to be a little bit of how you can go in and modify. So again, that was listing screens. A few of the other options in there is you have this auto expand groups. So right now I'm seeing everything within there for that particular client / account manager. But if I don't want it to expand, I can uncheck that box, hit apply, and then you'll notice it just kind of collapses everything. Not very useful for this particular report, but it could be for other ones. Now, all of those changes that I made, those are one-time changes, unless I go in and memorize the report. So if I close out of this and then go back into active projects, how it was when we first started this report is how it would show up. Again, because I did not have it save my changes, I just had it make those changes for that one particular time. But if I did want that particular report, so the active projects report, to run that way every single time, then I do want to click on the Memorize button. The second option that you have for that, if you want to keep your active projects, but you also want this to be a way that it runs each time, if you go into the Modify, you can click on Copy this view. It'll make a copy of it and then leave the original as it was, and then make this particular copy. So we'll go ahead and copy the report. It'll ask, are you sure? Yes. I'm going to hit apply and memorize. So now I'll have a report called Copy of Active Reports, but I'll also have the original Active Projects report as well. Okay. I'm going to take a look at some of the reports, or sorry, some of the questions that we have. How do we add calculated fields, whether it would be on project level or any other level? So custom fields are going to be in the back-end setup. So you're going to be in Menu, Admin, and System Setup. You'll see custom fields as the very last option. So if I need a custom field in projects or my employees or something like that, I choose where I want that custom field to be, click into there, and then I can add in different ones. So here's the ones that I've created. But if I don't have one that I need, then you can create the field. You do the field name, the caption, what is the field? So is it numeric? Is it a date field? Is it a checkbox? That type of thing. Do I need to add a description, or would someone know based off of the name that I gave that field what it would be? Again, do I need a hint? So if I hover over the field, will it tell me what this field is supposed to be? And is there a default value? Meaning if I am saying active, not active, or partial active, is that, do I want to say that most of them should default as active, but they would be able to change the value, so you can put in a default. When we're in projects, so when I create a project, is this field a required field that we have to fill out, or can we sometimes fill it out or leave it blank? Active meaning it's a field that we have available, and you can even do display when, so this field pops up when another field is created. Once you create that field, then you click and drag it, and then so now I would have two custom fields on my projects available. One is called person, one is called cost center. Let's see what else. We will go over advanced options, yes. Are you able to set up an email schedule for custom reports that auto-generates and sends based off of schedule that is set up? Yes. I'll show you that in a second. Why can't I copy any of the standard reports? So if you're in the report center, those are ones that we created. So for those you don't have the option of copying from those, you basically just have to use the custom report creation option in order to create it similar to those standard reports that we have in there. And can you rename the report called copy of? Yes. So if I'm in there again, so I go in, it was a project listing screen. It is labeled as copy of all active. I go into that modify again, go into those settings, and this is where the report name comes in. I mentioned when you create a new one, it does default as private, so you'll notice I don't have security groups, but when I uncheck private, then I can go ahead and indicate what are the groups that I want to use. Oops. And we'll call this Active Projects by AM, so Account Manager, because that's one of my groupings. So yes, you can change the name, and then you want to make sure that you memorize it so that when I look at my listing screens again, we would see Active Projects by AM instead of copy of all or copy of active projects. Okay. All right. So again, that was just one of the listings. You might see a lot of different options for being able to edit or create those reports. And then again, as you create reports, they're just going to show in here. If it's private, only you will be able to see it within that list. But if there are other groups, then they would see it similar to how this is set up. If I want that report to actually run and send out through email, so schedule the report, you can go under, actually, I have to run it first. So once I run the report, under the more, you're going to see a new schedule. So this would be a way to say, go ahead and send out this particular report to a set group of people. So I do new schedule. And then here's where we can add in the details of how that works. So click on the pencil button. Do I want to change the name of it? Do I want to add in a description? How long do we keep the report? And when should this start sending out? So maybe I want it to start on Monday. We choose the date. And then when does the system go and run this? So choose your time. Does it send it out as a PDF, Excel, or CSV? How often does it send it out? So I'm just going to say weekly, but you have daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly. And then within each section, you'll see every day, or every week, or every month. So again, I'll do this every 1 week on Monday. And then does this report stop sending out after a certain time? If not, then click no end date. But if it should end after a particular date or end by a particular date, you can choose those options in there. And then this is where we determine who should it be emailed to. So we can come in, it'll pull up staff first, but you have a few different options in there. And then you can go ahead and indicate what people should receive this. Click on add selected. And then those would be the people it would email to. One big thing is you want to make sure that they obviously have an email address in the system. If they don't, then they will not be receiving this report. So now that that's set up, that report will come to those people on June 17th, and it'll occur every Monday based off of how I set that up. One thing I'll show you is if I go into any of those, you'll notice under the more, I don't have that option. I don't have new schedule. Again, you have to run the report first, and then we get the new schedule option. And you can do this with a lot of the listing screens and a lot of the reports. You can make a schedule and have the system automatically email out to those people. How do I run a Gantt chart for a campaign with multiple projects? So that one would probably be in a different call. I would say set that up with your account manager to go over that. When you create a schedule email to send out, is there a way for it to only send the rolled up value instead of broken out? You would have to set up the report in order to do that. So what I mean by that is the way that you have the report running, whatever you see here is what it'll print out as. So even if I click on this and it's collapsed here, when I go and actually print this out, it's going to print out with the detail that's tucked in here. So when you're going in and doing the modify, for certain reports, you're going to have an option of grouping items together. this is not going to be one of those reports. So this one I don't have a grouping option, but you'll notice in some of them I do. So the reason it's giving me detail is because, again, we're at project level, and we told the system to run any project that is considered active. So even though I'm pulling by a particular account manager, it's still going to show me every single item under that person just because of the detail that we're asking it to pull. So in one of the other reports that I'll show you, there'll be an option for grouping. That's the way that we can get it to show everything collapsed and not have it print out with all that detail. All right, so that is one of those reports. And again, a lot of your listing screens will have that option. If I come into the everyone and you have a report center here, this again is where our standard reports are. So you'll notice we have a bunch of different options in here. Most of these you cannot edit. So if I come into chargeability, you'll notice I don't have an edit option in here. This is only going to run based off of the criteria and the setup that we created. So I really only have the option of generating and kind of narrowing down this list. Okay. But there are a few that you can actually edit. One of them is called the project budget analysis. This one, you can go in, and when I run the report, you'll notice that I actually have a modify button in here. Most of the others will not. So if I click on modify, again, this is one of the very few standard reports that you can go in and edit. So this one, the project budget analysis, is really a way for you to see actuals versus budgeted for multiple projects at a time. So rather than having to go into each project and running the budget versus the actuals, this is a way to kind of see at a glance for multiple clients and multiple projects. So project budget analysis is the report that a lot of people like. You'll notice I don't have a filters option in here, so you don't have the full ability to edit this particular report, but you have a lot of different options in here. Grouping and columns are what most people would need anyway. So those are what you would have the option of going in and editing. So kind of the same thing as before, where I have all these different fields. So these are my columns, but I can go in and edit. So this is a long name. It's current budget expense gross. So maybe I don't need to know that it's current because maybe we would only ever have one budget in there. So maybe we'll just call this budget expense gross, you know, and so you can actually edit the columns and what they show as. And then again, once you apply changes, then the report will go ahead and run based off of that change that I made. In your settings, again, kind of the same thing that you had before, so I can rename this if I wanted to. When I run it, should I show those search criteria? Should it be private? That type of thing. So not much different on that side. So again, if I modified it at any point, I would want to memorize it. I really didn't make a change, so I don't have the option of memorizing, but if I did make those changes, then I would need to memorize, otherwise that was a one-time change. I mentioned the ability to create your own custom reports. So again, we have a lot of different reports, and these typically cover a majority of what people would report on. But if there's just a report that we need, we don't have a standard, then you have this new custom report option. Again, you have to tell the system where are we starting from. So it's not just going to let you build a report based off of everything in the system. You have to choose where to start from. So you have contact management, which is more on the CRM side. Then you have project and traffic and purchasing. So this will kind of give you the starting point of what you want to build. A lot of people say they really want timesheet data. So then I would probably do something like time detail data or time detail data with no costs. Or if you have custom fields that you need to pull in, then this is probably the option for you. Other people might say, I want to pull more of a budget report but across the board. So it'd kind of be like project budget analysis, but maybe I don't need everything that's in there, or maybe I need to filter it down certain ways that the project budget analysis doesn't let me do. Then I either can do some of the allocated versus actuals, or maybe even the estimate, right? Because the estimate becomes your budget. So again, if I'm looking for a budget related report, I would start with one of these. Read the descriptions, because those are going to be key on how far you can get with that particular report. So what is the detail? Does it show every single little item, or does it go a little bit more summary? So very important to kind of start with what makes most sense for you. So I'm just going to pick the time detail data report, because I'm saying that we would need a report based off of employees' time. So we're going to do time detail. And again, it's a blank slate. So I have to choose, what do I want? A lot of times I'll start with my groupings and then do columns. Other times I might edit my columns first and then decide how would I group this report based off of what columns I have. So because it's time detail data, I'd probably want to know who was the one that actually put the time. So I'm going to start typing in user, and I want the user full name. The next thing I might want to know is, let's see, maybe the client. So who do I spend the most amount of hours on? So I might do client name or client ID. Name. So we'll just do 2 groupings for now. And then what are the columns? So if I'm adding in time, I probably need to know what project number or name or both it is. So we'll do project number. What task I put that time to, so task name or task ID. Actual hours, so how many hours did I actually put on there? So we'll do actual hours worked. Maybe what service I put my time to. Maybe whether it's billable or not. So billable is going to be a yes or no field. And maybe we'll do one more field in here. Maybe something cost related. Actually, allocated. Maybe what I was allocated versus what I actually worked. Okay. So you can move these around. So maybe I want to know what I was allocated and then what I worked. And then this is where those calculations might come in. So maybe I want to know the difference between these two. So I click on calculated field. What is my caption? So I'm asking for the difference between allocated versus actual. So maybe I call this remaining or something similar to that. It is a number field. And then this is where I'm telling it what are the fields that we want to either add or subtract. So I'm saying that I want to start with allocated. So I find allocated hours. And then I want to know minus my actual hours. Actual hours worked. You'll notice some of the symbols do come in automatically. For me, I want it to be a minus, so just remove the one that doesn't make sense. So it's going to be allocated hours minus my actual hours. And then you have a couple of different options. So sort just means, does it kind of sort it numerically? Does it sort order? What one out of these fields should it sort by? Should this field subtotal at all? So do I subtotal it by client, or what were my username, or by client? I could choose a subtotal in there. And then I'm going to go ahead and save. So now it's called remaining, and it's a calculated field, so you'll see that. And maybe I want that to be next to those two. So allocated, actual, and then what's remaining. I mentioned before grouping rows together. So this is where, if it's showing, let's say my user or my employee, put time to one particular task and service on 4 different days, but I want that to group all together. When I click on this, it brings in this other option and says, how do you want it to group? So a lot of times, if you want it to go ahead and add it together, then you're doing sum. If you wanted to average or count, count would typically be more of if I want to know, well, just how many projects did a particular account manager have during a time frame, then count. It would go ahead and count each one. So if I had 5 different projects, my count would be 5. So this is where you would need to do the groupings or the group rows together so that it collapses all the detail automatically rather than having it all show as its own line in that project or in that report. The next thing that I do is go into filters. So if I don't do any filters, it's going to run every single time transaction that I put into this report. So someone asked what report data set we used. We use time detail data, which means that it's going to look at timesheet data. So most of the time, if you want to run this by client, you're going to type in client ID. And maybe I want to do multiple clients. One of the options in here is an any of, meaning I can choose this client, and this client. So it's not an all or nothing. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing. I can go by user. So maybe I want to do a particular user, or again, I could do any of for that one as well. So I can pull multiple users. And maybe I just want to call this employee. A date range. So a lot of times for time detail, it would be the actual date worked. So I could do date worked, but in there you'll notice that I also had an option for like date worked month. So I can just have it do a particular month or a worked month number. So if I do 12, that means December. If I do 1, that means January. So you have a bunch of different options in here, but I'm just going to say date worked. And again, for dates, majority of the time you're going to do a between, so I can say between this date and this date. And then we'll do maybe a few more, maybe what for a particular project we want to be able to run this, so we'll do project number. And so there's 4 different filters that I set, and I want to call this time employee. And again, I want to uncheck this so that maybe others would be able to run this report as well. Now, one thing that I wanted to show you, since we're in here, you have these standard reports and they're under different headers. Any custom report that you create just goes into this other report center. But if I actually want this to show under maybe my project financials or my traffic reports or something like that, you can click on this drop down and choose where that should actually show. Okay. So now I want to take a look at what I have so far, because I might like this, or I might just want to run it to see what it's looking like so far, and then maybe continue to make changes. So I did an any of for client ID. So if I'm choosing multiple, I basically just choose the ones for that one. Same thing with employee. I did an any of, so I can check multiple employees for that to run. I did a date range between, and then I did a particular project number, so I can choose just one particular project. Again, if I just run it for everything, then this report might be fairly large, just depending on how many years you've been in the system, but then I can go ahead and run it, and it'll tell me there's this many rows. So looking at this report, you know, again, I have it grouped by the person and then the client, and then it'll tell me how many hours. And then I also have that remaining, right? So I did hours, allocated hours, and then the actual, and then it's minusing them together to give me that remaining column. Okay. Let me take a look at the questions. How can you create a report which lists all of the projects assigned to specific users? That's typically, if you're assigning, you can do, if you're in custom reports, you could do like task data. So in here, task assignments would be a good one, or project task data would also do it for you, because it's looking for each task. You're going to be able to pull in the user for that. So that would be an option. But you also have one that might even be set up for you already. It's a view, and it's called assignments. And so you could start from all and then edit this one, because it should be showing like what the task is and actual completes and who's in it. Typically you would group by person, so that might be a change that you have. But this one, or any of those task assignment data reports, would be probably my recommendation on where to start from that. Can we have a report that is just groupings? No, you have to have at least one column. So if I tried to do a report with just a grouping, it'll error me out and say that we have, so it'll say there must be at least one column. So you have to have at least one column in the report for it to run. So you can have 100 different groupings, but at least one column is needed in there. When we run the employee actual hours, how can we get a subtotal by staff? Employee actual hours, there it is. This one, again, you can't really change. So your option would be to create one. And again, employee actual hours. So the one that I created would be close to what you're looking for. So then, I know I renamed it, I think. Time by employee. Yep, this is the one. So when you come in, subtotals. So if I wanted to subtotal at my allocated hour, you'll notice this is subtotaling. And if I want it to subtotal by person, you say so show subtotal for this group. And maybe I don't want it to subtotal by client, so we'll uncheck that. But it checks those both by default. So whenever you have anything that would be a total, so allocated hours could be a total field, same thing with actual hours, there's the subtotal. That's checked by default. Then you just have to tell it, well, what do we subtotal this by? So I did by username. So when I do this, you'll see this is my employee, this is my client, and it'll show a subtotal. So I subtotaled for both of these, but I did not subtotal my remaining. And then when you print that out, it'll again show those subtotals in there. So you have to choose at what level does it subtotal. So here's my subtotals for that particular user. There's my subtotal for that particular user. So it's already kind of built in. You just have to determine what level you want those subtotals to show at. Can you create custom report groups rather than other? Yes, that is going to be in a different section though. So again, it's more of a setup option. So you're going to be in admin and system setup, global lists, and you have this option called report groups. So if I want one called, I'm just going to do something with my client. So now that's one of my report groups. You're going to notice when I come in here, I will not see that option because I have to actually put a report to that particular data set, so time by employee. And how we do that is, again, you're going to have the option of, sorry, I moved my box in front of something. There it goes. So if I go into the edit and I go to settings, now I'll see the option for by client. So I choose by client, apply, and save. And now that heading will show down here. So the first option is creating the group. That was in system setup under those global lists. And then once you've created the group, you have to actually tag a particular report, or at least one report, to there in order for it to show. So report groupings, here's the groupings that I added in. And then so in here, I have to actually put a particular report to it in order for it to show. Okay. All right. So we are coming up on our hour. What else can I show you in here? So again, you have a lot of different reports. that you have the option of going in and creating. So you have to choose what would work better for you as far as what's the starting point. It may take you a little bit to keep playing and determine which data set. So you'll notice in mine, I have a bunch that I didn't label, and I might have multiples of the same one just because I'll run it and determine, nope, that's not the one that I want because it doesn't have all of the fields that I need. But you might have to just continue to create. As soon as you do create one, it does save it in your other. So even if I have nothing in it, so I didn't put anything in this this activity one, I don't have any groupings or field, it already created it. So if you don't want it, you can just come in and say delete this view, and then it'll no longer show. So just know that when you click on this plus button and you actually choose one, it creates that report whether you put anything in it or not. Okay. So there's a question, which data set is best to use when wanting to create reports around campaign level information? I think we have some that are, yeah, there you go. So if you start typing in where you think it would go, you can start typing it in and it'll give you the option in here. So then you would probably create it from here. But again, if we didn't have this, then your listing screen for campaigns would also be a good start as well. So if I go into Project Manager and Campaigns, you can go into the listing screens, which are on this side. I always start from the all, so nothing that's narrowed down, and then go in and modify to actually edit the campaign level report. Okay. So one thing that I'll also say is, as you guys are creating those reports, if you get stuck, you can email it to your account manager, so support@workamajig.com, and then tell them where the report is, or if you're in the report, you'll notice that it's not this one, but each report is custom URL'd. So if you cut and paste this into the email, it'll take your account manager directly to that report so they can look at it and then they can help you out. Because obviously that's not every single functionality that we have, but obviously for specifics, for specific issues that you're having with the report, we would have to take a look. So just tell us what you're looking for. If you already have a report that maybe you run from a different system, or you have an example of what you would like to see, those are very, very helpful, because then we can see what is the detail that you're looking for, how does it display out. So definitely give us as much detail as possible, and then we'll see if we can edit your report. Just know that not every report that you're looking for is going to be possible. We try to get it as close to as possible, but again, there are some limitations, so we wouldn't be able to get maybe every single report that you're looking for, but we definitely get quite close. All right, so can you show the export import report feature? So when you run it, this is basically the ability to export it. So if I want this report out again in CSV or Excel, click on the print button and then again choose the option. I don't have Excel on here, I have numbers, I think, so it might show up a little bit different, but when you do that, it'll go ahead and bring up the report, and then you can tweak it in Excel as needed, or numbers if you're on the Mac side. So that's how you can export it. You can import reports, but typically it's just easier to set it up, just because setting up the actual import file might take you just as long as it would to actually create the report. But this is maybe what it would look like. Again, I have numbers, I don't have Excel, but this would be it exported into Excel, and then whatever my Excel functionalities are at that point, it's up to Excel to do whatever you're looking for if you're exporting it and trying to edit the report from there. So that's the export. But if you do want to import, you can come into Admin Manager. All the importing is here. And then choose where should it go. So if it's importing like employees or something like that, you choose employees or whatever is most applicable. Any other questions? Okay. So again, the recording will be sent out usually within 24 to 48 hours. But again, that website that I showed you, which was just our support.workamajig.com website, if you type in webinars in the search, it will bring you to this page. This shows, again, the upcoming, but also the past. So if you want to look at any of the past recordings that we have done, they're all going to be listed there, so you can listen or view those at any time, or if you want to send it around to your employees. Okay. All right, guys. Well, I hope you have a wonderful day.